Get ready for a take.
Mark it.
Action.
Come on, guys.
Hello everyone and welcome to this live lounge event where we are speaking to 4 lovely academics that we have here at the University of Lincoln. My name is Emily and I'm going to be hosting this event for about the next hour or so. Please feel free to put any questions that you have for our academics in the comments section below and we will do our very best to answer as many of them as we can. But today is just a day to get to know some of our amazing academics. So first of all, we're going to introduce them. So we're going to start with Ollie. If you just want to tell everyone who you are and what you teach and what you do here at the university.
Hi there, I'm Ollie Pearson and I'm a lecturer in the philosophy program here in Lincoln, which means I sort of teach a range of different topics, but those include discussions about the nature of the world around us and how we know the world around us.
Fabulous. And then next to you, we've got Louis.
Hello there. So Lewis Harmon, I'm one of the lecturers in the law school here, and I'm a solicitor by practice. So I deal with a wide range of law here at Lincoln.
Fabulous. And then we've got Alex.
So I'm Alex Bowman. I'm the Director of Teaching and Learning for Engineering, and I teach across first year and a little bit of fourth year. So I teach mechanical engineering and some computing and programming for engineers.
Fabulous. And then finally, we've got Joanna.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Joanna. It says management next to my name, and I'm actually the head of department for the Department of Management in the business school here at Lincoln. So I don't get to teach very much at all, but I lead a team of academics and academic lecturers, and they occasionally let me out to teach leadership, human resource management, and subjects like that.
Fabulous stuff. So we're going to start off with kind of light-hearted questions. So first of all, what is everyone's favourite book? If we start with Ollie again, and then Joanna will finish with you, so you've got a bit more time to think about it. But yeah, what's your favourite book? A bit of an icebreaker question.
Okay, yeah, well, I mean, I guess if we're going fiction, then it would probably be Kurt Vonnegut's Cat's Cradle. I mean, I just, as an author, he just paints these great images, which I enjoy. So yeah, I think that.
Fabulous. Lewis, what about you?
I would say I'm quite a big modern fantasy geek, and I'll hold my hands up, very proud to be so. Big fan of Brandon Sanderson, kind of the big player in Magic Fantasy these days. So I'd probably say the Final Empire book that's first in his Mistborn trilogy would be mine.
Fabulous, very interesting. Alex, what about you?
So I quite like science fiction and fantasy as well. I'm going to be a bit mean and not just pick one book. I'm going to pick 7 if that's all right. So I'm going to pick the Chronicles of Narnia because they're definitely my favourite. Everybody.
Yeah, they're one of my favourites as well. Joanna, what about you?
I'm really grateful that Alex picked what is known as a children's book or set of books, but of course it appeals to everyone, because the book that I think is sort of most precious to me, not everyone will be old enough to remember Richard Scarry, but back in my childhood in the 1970s he did picture books with lots of different images, food, day-to-day objects, and it was a great children's reading book. Now I've got a Richard Scarry book that I bought in the early 1990s in the Czech Republic, that was still Czechoslovakia at the time, and that has lots of different objects and stories and pictures and families, and it's in English, French, German and Czech. I've only got about 50 words of Czech to my name, but I just love it. It's such a precious little book because it's quite a big book, because it just helps with different vocabulary in a really easy and accessible way. So that's my favorite.
That sounds lovely. Okay, so as I mentioned, everyone, you can put your questions in the comment section below, and we will have people monitoring them so that we can do our best to answer as many of them as possible. So to start with, I think it probably works best if we go in the same order that I have been already, because that's how I can see you all on my screen. So we're going to start with all of your careers before you came to Lincoln. So so what was it that you were doing before you decided to come to Lincoln? So Ollie, yeah, we'll start with you.
Okay, well, I guess I had a bit of a gap between finishing school and going to university. And I mean, it was only a short gap, but I confess I went through a little bit of a personal crisis. I finished my A-levels and I was all set up to go to university and actually to become an engineer. And I suddenly realized I was doing that just because it seemed like the appropriate thing to do rather than because it's what I wanted to do. I had this moment of panic and decided not to go to university, and spent a year working as a rope access worker, sort of painting the external windows and things of buildings of great height and abseiling off chimneys and things like that, and thought about what I actually wanted to do. And I realized I did very much wanted to go to university, and that I wanted to take a radically different path, and that was to study philosophy. And that's what I did, and I loved the subject so much. I just wanted to keep studying philosophy for as long as I could, and that basically led me to here, persisting with that passion and continuing to sort of study and work within the university setting. So
Yeah, that's really refreshing, I think, because a lot of people kind of expect to you kind of jump on that conveyor belt of university and everything, and yeah, and deciding to change your mind essentially, it can be quite daunting. So to hear someone as successful as yourself that has done that and found what they're really passionate about is really, really good to hear. Lewis, what about you? What did you do?
Yeah. So before joining the university on the teaching side, I was in practice. So I completed my law degree, went into practice as a solicitor. I hit the crossroads when I finished my law degree about where I wasn't sure which way to go, whether to become a solicitor or a barrister. And I was leaning towards barrister, but circumstances pushed me down the solicitor road. And I was head of department in private practice, specialising in immigration law for a while, particularly around Brexit. So you can imagine practicing immigration law while Brexit was ongoing, quite a challenge. But actually had a similar thing to Ollie in a way, because I really love public speaking and I love being on my feet and presenting, which is what made me initially want to become a barrister. But like what Ollie was saying, I joined the TEDx program in Lincoln and decided I wanted to have a go at putting my skills to the test in TEDx. And I did a talk about actually what do you want to be when you grow up. And a similar thing to what Ollie said there, I realized while I was doing this talk, why am I practicing law? This isn't actually the right thing for me personally. It's the path that seemed like the right one to go on. But then I realized I turned to the University of Lincoln, and I was a graduate of Lincoln myself, and saw some vacancies and thought, actually, this is where I love to be. So actually, I want to rejoin the team and get to do what I love, which is get stuck into law as much as I can and help students pursue their careers. So it was legal practice, and then realizing that actually being on the teaching side of the fence in law is definitely more where my skills are.
Yeah, that's fabulous. Alex, what about you? What did you do before you came to Lincoln?
So I was a bit different in that I was always interested in teaching, and I knew very early on that I wanted to be a teacher. So when I finished my A-levels, I did my degree with the Open University, and I was working as a cover teacher as well at the time, getting lots of experience in schools. Did some teacher training in schools, and then thought, well, actually, I quite like to teach to a higher level. I'm really interested in doing a little bit of research around this as well. So moved into the university and the engineering school when it first opened, and they've been stuck with me ever since. But it was a brilliant transition. So a different switch, but always with teaching, but just to a different level.
Yeah, that's really lovely. And Joanna, what about you? What did you do before you came to Lincoln?
So I'm living proof that there is life after failed A-levels, because my A-level career wasn't my finest hour, and went into a very early panic because my plans to either study law or to be a teacher. Interesting how we've got so much in common, isn't it? Fell to nothing. So I studied an HND, a higher national diploma, way back in the 1980s. Then worked very briefly as a graduate trainee in retail management, food retail, which definitely wasn't my thing. Took me a couple of years to work that out, but again, that was sort of took a bit of adjusting. Then picked up some work in local government administration, which was okay, but not very academically demanding. And then I hit a bit of a crossroads where I could do some staff development to train to be an accountant, and did that for a year when two jobs came up at the local further education college in the town I was working, one in HR, or personnel as we called it back in the 1980s, and then one in accountancy. And it just so happens I got interviewed for the HR job on the Wednesday and was offered it, and therefore didn't go for the interview for the accountancy job. So, you know, the twists and turns of fate sent me down an HR path. So then I trained in human resource management and worked in a practitioner field for about 5 years. And then a lecturer job came up in the FE college, the further education college I was working in. And instead of going to process the vacancy for the manager, I went and had to chat with the manager and said, actually, I think I would quite like to do this. So I did realise my vision of teaching eventually. And it was just maybe 10 years after I expected to, and ended up teaching sort of 16-year-olds and older. And we were teaching some undergraduates at that point in the FE college where I worked, and then from there moved on to another university a few years later, where I worked for 16 years before I came to Lincoln about 3.5 years ago.
Wow.
Can I jump in just to
Yeah.
say, Joanna, there's still time. We could still come join the law side, you know. I've got a nice place on my judicial bench here.
Well, it's interesting you should say it, because of course working in HR, there's quite a lot of employment law that you
Absolutely.
have to be au fait with from just day-to-day management practices. So, you know, the management that we do in the business school has a lot of legal sort of crossovers that we have to be very mindful of, or at least know there are legal experts that we can go to you know, to get the right answer rather than the answer we think is the right answer. But interestingly, as a line manager, so if any of you are out there thinking, do I want to do management? Do I want to do human resource management? Do I want to be a lawyer? Do I want to do anything, you know, entirely different? There's plenty of time in your life to change tack. And I deal a lot more now with knotty human resource management and sometimes legal issues than I ever did when I worked in HR. I wrote a lot of policies and I sat on a lot of interview panels, but actually I'm probably doing more law related, or have to be very mindful of the law related aspects of my job now. I will still defer to the experts, of course, when needed. But thank you for that, Lewis.
Yeah, no, that's also interesting, because I suppose you've all kind of had that not kind of traditional, like I said, conveyor belt to where you kind of all are. It's kind of, like you said, Joanna, kind of fate that's kind of led you in all of your experiences.
I would say on that, I think the conveyor belt is a myth.
Yeah.
Not many people at all, I think, go down a traditional path. Everyone's path is so unique and catered to our own circumstances. It's you can never know where you're going to end up, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, amazing. So so now what I want to ask is kind of what you're all doing now at the university. So what projects you're working on, what exciting things have you got going on, exciting things coming up. So yeah, we'll start with Ollie again.
Okay, well, yeah, as I said earlier, I currently teach philosophy, so I teach right across the program from the first year upwards. And in doing that, I teach a range of different courses, but my own specialisms lie in various topics related to the nature of time and the nature of the mind or the self. So that's where I do some of my sort of specialist third year teaching, sort of teaching more from my own research. And linking with that, I mean, that's where a lot of my own research has been in, and where some of the current research I'm working on fits in as well. So some of the discussions we have in the nature of time concerns about our sense in which time seems to flow, and the future events come towards us, and momentarily we're here and this is all happening, and then it's gone again already, but luckily, you know, summer's on its way, and so on. And these impressions of how time sort of flows and how we're in this fixed in this present moment, but it's a present moment that's always changing. A lot of my research around those sorts of features, and something I'm working on currently with some colleagues actually at different institutions around the world, is to investigate people's experiences of these sorts of things. What really sorts of experiences do we have that lead us to say that time flows, for that to be a plausible metaphor for how the world is? So it's very easy for us to sit here and go, well, I think I experience it like this, and on that basis, I'm going to argue in these different ways. And a lot of us do that. And the smaller the circles you move in, the easier it is to convince yourselves, well, that's how everyone experiences time. So at the moment, we're trying to reach out and try and ascertain whether actually how we take everyone to experience time really does coincide with how everyone says they do actually experience time. So to broaden our horizons and try and see how much we're in agreement with everyone else, to then put those bits of evidence, that data about people's experiences again back into work to argue to see how we might better understand the nature of time itself. So that's one direction I'm going in at the moment. So.
Wow, it sounds so interesting. Lewis, what about you?
I just say that's really fascinating. I wish I could say I studied time.
Yeah.
I philosophize on time. That's so awesome, especially coming back to the sci-fi and fantasy stuff from the beginning. My side, I guess, is a bit drier. In law, I mean, since I left practice and moved over to the university, I've kind of parked my immigration specialism for a while. Still dabble a little bit as much as I can. But in terms of my teaching, I mostly deal with our third years, and I cover a wide range of civil law. So I don't do crime, because most people get interested in crime. I do kind of the other stuff. So I do a lot of employment law. So Joanna, we've got another link there. A lot of employment law. Civil litigation. Yeah, absolutely. Civil litigation. So anything that's involving people or companies suing each other. I love a courtroom, which is why I'm in here today. Anything that gets me in the courtroom is great fun. And consumer law, really, really passionate about consumer law as well, and particularly dealing with kind of modern consumer trends, the way goods are sold to people. Really interested at the minute in the gaming industry. Sorry, I can't speak now. Really interested in the gaming industry, about microtransactions and loot boxes and battle passes, and how in gaming, how that's packaged and whether it actually complies with consumer law. But aside from that, as I don't have a research background, I'm not one that is really kind of theorizing and looking at law reforms and things like that. I do a lot of the practical stuff. So downstairs where I'm sat now, we have our law clinic, our free legal advice centre. So a big thing that I do is I supervise our third year students taking on real clients from the local community and researching and providing legal solutions. So that's what I focus on, those students who particularly have an interest in pursuing a career in practice, I should say. I help build those skills. That's what I'm working on. Really trying to expand and refine our law clinic and make it as widely accessible as possible to the broadest audience possible, and ensure that the students get something meaningful out of it along the way. So that's my teaching remit.
No, it's also so interesting. Alex,
I was going to say, just as it was said that what I did is interesting. Then you go to hear what everyone else is doing. There's so many different interesting.
This is what makes my job so easy. I can just sit and just like see how interesting all of your jobs are. Alex, what about you?
See, I feel now I have to say something really interesting, but so in terms of what I'm working on, I teach on the mechanical, electrical and biomedical programs and mechatronics programs. So I teach a real cross-section of students. And a bit like Lewis, I've kind of stepped a little bit away from the research side to think about pedagogic research and how we teach things differently, particularly in engineering, where we've got this real cross-section both of subjects and of students within those subjects. So we were talking about there not being a conveyor belt, and the traditional student it's kind of a myth. It doesn't really exist anymore. There's less of those, what we would maybe have considered traditional, because people come from all sorts of backgrounds. So what I'm looking at is how do we teach more inclusively? How do we engage with students from all those different backgrounds and make things accessible and engaging? So some of the sessions involve, learning through play and looking at different engineering ideas by playing with toys. I have a lot of my daughter's toys that I bring in to play with as demonstrations. So that's the sort of thing, and students seem to be enjoying it, and we're looking at rolling out that sort of model in other areas too.
Yeah, no, that's also super interesting. And we have actually had a question for you, Alex, is where are you sat? Someone's very interested in where you actually are.
So I'm in the Isaac Newton building on campus, which is it hosts the School of Engineering, the School of Computer Science, and the School of Maths and Physics. And it's one of our specialist research rooms where we've got an anechoic chamber. So all the foam tiles you can see behind me absorb sound, and you can do acoustic testing in there. So it's a bit like, I guess, being in a TV studio if you've been in one of those, or a recording studio. This has been used for listening to different devices. So we've done acoustic tests where we listen to objects, both when they're running normally, and then we induce some faults and try and work out just by listening to them what the problem is. But don't ask me too many technical questions on that, because that's not my area. A colleague has done that, and I'm just aware of what they've done.
Yeah, no, that sounds super interesting. Joanna, is there anything that you're currently working on?
Oh, well, yes, I was thinking, and it's where do I start and where do I stop? So the Department of Management in the business school is huge and covers lots and lots of discipline areas, from human resource management, logistics, entrepreneurship, etc., etc. So just a few highlights, I suppose. Tomorrow we're welcoming, I think, around about 35 visitors. I've got a crib sheet in front of me here, which I wasn't necessarily going to mention because I didn't know you were going to ask the question, but as you have, just so happens I've got it in front of me, and it's a colloquium looking at entrepreneurship and innovation. So any sort of new ideas, people setting up their own companies, but we're welcoming a group of PhD students and their mentors. So there's a lot of research and a lot of activity going on in there. So that's very exciting. And a colloquium, if you've not heard that phrase before, it's a bit like a mini conference. And just before I came into this session here, I saw my colleagues, and they're hastily getting very whizzy lanyards and these agendas out. So I'm hoping to pop in and say hello and see them doing that. All being well as well, I hope to be visiting and attending a conference of my own next week, looking at renewable energies. So this, I will be going as a participant, not delivering, because sustainability is a huge part of what we all have to be mindful of, and that very much impacts on how business is done and how management is conducted. So we're looking at that both in terms of just the research that's happening in that area, the way that jobs are being created and need to be created in that area, and also what we teach and what our curriculum looks like, so that we can make those changes. And then just to take it sort of on a completely different angle, the other things that the team will get involved with, and I suppose to a certain extent I did on Monday, is we're very keen to get involved with our local community and the local region of Lincolnshire. So we do something called challenge-based learning, where we ask local companies, local organisations, so they could be charities, they could be small to medium-sized enterprise, they could be big businesses, to set our students challenges, real life problems, and then you might get a group of students working on a problem, to then present back to the to those that have set the problem, to the employers, and that way you're dealing with really real life problems, but using the theoretical learning that you've imparted on that. And I visited a group on Monday where I talked about my own PhD. So I mentioned doing an HND back in the 1980s. I did my master's degree 7-8 years later when I was working in HR, but was very late to the doctoral party and getting my PhD, which I this time last year, actually, I was still writing and finishing my thesis, and got that sort of within the last few months. So I've got a whole set of work to do looking at that, and that does include a little bit on time and narrative. So maybe there's a bring the whole thing back full circle there, because I looked at generations and the differences, or not, as the case may be, between different generations. So I was doing work with some trainees, leadership trainees, on the different generations and how they can be impacted. So that was quite interesting as well.
Fabulous. I think we're just learning how interlinked everyone's areas of expertise are. Amazing. So one of the other questions we've got is, how did everyone decide to go into academia? So I know, Alex, you kind of spoke a little bit about a natural love for teaching, but Ollie, if we start with you, how did you decide that this was kind of what you wanted to do?
Yeah, well, I think perhaps I touched on it. I mean, really, it's just love of the subject. So once I started studying philosophy at university, was really enjoying it. And I mean, that's a good thing insofar as that helps keep you motivated, which can hopefully help you do well in the subject as well. And I was lucky. I did well enough to go on to do a master's, which I did. Again, just because I was enjoying it so much and I wanted to do more of it. And then that led for me to a PhD, because again, I felt there was much more I wanted to study and do research on. And I saw that as a good avenue forward for me, because I thought, I mean, at that stage, I was already aware of academia as a potential career, and I definitely liked the sounds of that. But I was also aware that if I could get that further qualification, then even if I was outside academia, it would help me sort of stand out in other careers that I might pursue. So I then went for the PhD, and I was lucky whilst doing my PhD to get some time and experience to then start doing some teaching and things while studying. And then it became clear to me just how much I enjoyed those aspects of academia as well, because the research is something I knew I loved, because that was my passion for the subject already. And it's when you start having some experience doing the teaching as well, as was mentioned earlier, I realized how much I enjoyed that aspect of academia as well. And at that stage, I was just convinced that was the path I wanted to take. And I just then managed to continue from there. So.
Yeah, no, it's super interesting. Lewis, what about you?
See, it's a bit of a funny one for me, because sometimes I feel a bit like a fraud using the title academic, because academia is not really, certainly on the research side, it's not really what I do or where my focus lies. I'm still very much quite hands-on in the practice world. But in terms of what drew me to have this role now, I'll be honest with you, and it's not necessarily the academic role that drew me in, it was the university. Because as a graduate, having moved to Lincoln, studied here, got my legal career and pursued that in Lincoln as well off the back of my time at university, seeing the University of Lincoln having vacancies in the law teaching team, I just thought that's where I want to be. I want to be back here. I love it here at the university so much, and staying in this city, that I just wanted to come back and be part of that family again, and joining many of the lecturers that taught me and turning back up and saying hello again. You've got me for even more than 3 years now. So it's that really. It was not necessarily the draw into academia specifically, but it was kind of two things, a bit of a push and a pull. I wasn't enjoying some aspects of legal practice personally, just some things that didn't connect with me as much as I thought it might. But more importantly, the pull back to the university to be part of the team again and be part of doing things like this, that's what really drew me back.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting. Yeah. Alex, what about you? What made you decide?
So I think because I'd always been in teaching since finishing school, I really enjoyed teaching, and I sat thinking, which bits of teaching do I really like the most? And I was a science teacher in a secondary school, and it was the A-level physics sessions. And it didn't matter if they put them last thing on a Friday or first thing on a Monday. Everyone was really enthusiastic. It was great stuff to teach. You could really get there was a lot to sink your teeth into. And I thought I'd really like to do more of that. So coming to university, there was the opportunity to teach at that level and above a lot more, consistently. And alongside that, to then pick up the research side of things and actually look at things that I was interested in myself in a lot more detail, so I could think in a lot more depth. So again, similarly, I didn't do the PhD straight away. I left it a few years, and then I think probably about a year and a half ago, finished the PhD in a research side. So in looking at some mechanical and mechanical stuff. But now I'm thinking, well, okay, now I want to do the same sort of thing and lots more research on the teaching side as well. So I think it's the enthusiasm to learn and the environment to learn that has drawn me in.
Yeah, fabulous. And Joanna, what about you?
So as you heard earlier, I always liked the idea of being a teacher, and took a different path, got my master's degree, and then sort of fell into a little bit of part-time lecturing. I think a lot of people come into universities and lecturing jobs by testing the waters. A friend of mine at the time said, "Oh, Joanna, being paid to talk, you must be in heaven. It's your perfect job." And I do quite like to talk. But of course, teaching and learning isn't always about talking. And I do say to my colleagues, sometimes we need to teach less and get our students to learn more. And things like the challenge-based learning that I mentioned earlier is a much better way of doing that. So it's the students that are active rather than us being really active at the front and the students sort of falling asleep at the back of the lecture. So we have to be very guarded against that. So I did that for a few years. I don't think I had a huge amount of confidence initially. I can remember speaking to my university lecturer saying, "Oh, they've asked me to do some part-time work at my college." And well, I'm not surprised. And I was probably more surprised than they were. I think I found my happy place. And as I say, maybe 3-4 years later, when I ended up taking that first full-time role, I knew I'd arrived. I knew this was the sort of career I wanted. If I was honest, I'd kind of just sort of not coasted, but maybe not stretched myself to my full ability in my mid to late 20s. I did do a master's degree in my defence and my professional qualifications in HR, so it wasn't complete, sort of underperforming. But I knew there was more for me, and it wasn't just a case of that, it was more a case of the right thing rather than the level of what I was doing. So I think finding the right thing, the right subject, and knowing that might not be the first thing you ever study or do, there are other paths you can take later on, was really important. So I think falling into that just feels, I love the fact that in a university setting, there are so many differences of opinion. There are so many different subjects, and only a few are represented here. But of course, we teach so many different things and from so many different perspectives. And that, I think, excites me. It doesn't intimidate me, or there isn't a single right answer. There might be, my accountancy colleagues may disagree with me because it's either a debit or a credit. But, with a few exceptions, there aren't so many right and wrong answers. There's a lot you can debate and a lot you can explore. And I love the richness of that within a university setting. I think that excites me. So this is definitely my happy place. It's a world that I enjoy inhabiting, and it's kind of where I belong. So I think finding where you belong is really important. And as you can see, hopefully, it's something I do feel quite passionate about because I know it's where I need to be.
Yeah, no, that's lovely. We've got a couple of questions from our viewers, and like I said, everyone watching, please keep your questions coming in the comment section below, and we will be asking them throughout this live stream. So Joanna, we've got a specific one for you from Maddie. She says, do you have any information about presentations in the marketing course?
I'm sure, I don't know, Maddie, whether you mean presentations about the projects we do or whether you would do presentations if you were studying marketing. If it's the second question, then the answer is almost definitely yes, because over the course of 3 years, you will do very practical, you'll do pitches, you might do vlogs and blogs. I'll just keep an eye on the chat and see if you want to just enhance that question so I answer the right one. If it's a case of wanting to know more, I'm sure between us all and colleagues working in the background and my fellow head of department who looks after marketing can make sure we get the right connections to you. So either we will have a pre-prepared presentation we can send your way so you can watch that. If not, we can probably engage one of the marketing academics and they may do you your own personal presentation so you can find out a lot more about the programme. So I'll just keep an eye on the chat, but hopefully somebody can answer that, and I can always add in there as well to support you on that. But if it's a case of doing presentations, then absolutely. But we'll also help you and train you and give the opportunity to make mistakes, pre-record, watch yourself. We can all do that nowadays, can't we? And yeah, just help you make that as good as it can be before you're actually assessed in it. But hopefully better than sitting an exam.
Fabulous stuff. And then another question for everyone, so we'll probably go round again, is about Lincoln as a city. So obviously, Lewis, you mentioned about that pull to the university itself, but Lincoln as a city, what's everyone's favourite bits about Lincoln? Ollie, if we start with you.
Yeah, well, maybe it's a cliche, but it's a beautiful city, and I think your environment has a bearing on your feeling and your happiness on a day-to-day basis. So I think being somewhere that is beautiful with that character, it does bear on you, and hopefully it adds a little bit of happiness and character to your own experiences here. So I mean, there's so many things we could list, but I'll just say the one and let others carry on for the moment.
Fabulous. Yeah, Lewis.
I think the thing for me is I grew up in a small seaside tourist town, and for a lot of my friends, the idea of going to university meant going off to the big cities and kind of being part of that industrialized hub, if you like. I went to quite a few universities for open days, and to be honest with you, within minutes of being on the campus at Lincoln, I was sold. Mostly because I think for anyone who is moving away from home and is looking at a new university city to live in, I think Lincoln is so easy to move into, and our campus is right off the high street. I always say it's in the heart of the city, and then I correct myself and say it is the heart of the city. And the fact that everything is so accessible, it's so easy to get to. Our campus is around the beautiful Brayford Pool, and all main accommodation blocks are just a couple of minutes walk away. I just think it's such a great university and a great city to be in terms of just being a part of the city. I know there are some universities out there where the university campus is kind of segregated away from the city centre itself, but Lincoln and the University of Lincoln are one, from my perspective, and I absolutely love it here, and I've said to many people before, I have no intention of leaving.
Yeah, no, that's a lovely line. I think that someone needs to pay you for that line to use it on the market. It's great.
I can have it. I'll sell it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no. Alex, what about you?
I'd have to agree with that last statement. I equally love it here and have no plans on leaving at all. So I've been in Lincoln, the city, all my life, and the university for 10 years. And I think my favourite thing about the city and the university, it's the same thing. And it's the people, the community. You get to know people very easily. They're very friendly, whether it's on the campus or in the wider city. And they're on lots of networks. Whatever your interest is, there's something that you can be involved with that's not just your academic studies. So yes, they're important, but there's also lots of other things that happen on campus and in the wider city that you can plug into and feel like you belong. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, I think that's what stood out to me the first time I came here, was how lovely everyone is, and how like you could literally walk into a shop and strike up a conversation with pretty much anyone you meet. So yeah, because when I was looking around in COVID, so I didn't actually turn up to, like, my first day of university was the first time I ever saw Lincoln, which like was pretty scary, but like immediately, like I was like, oh, this is like completely different. Like I felt so at home here, and yeah, I know I'm only in my second year, but I already am like, I don't want to leave. So yeah, Joanna, what about you?
Well, I thought I was going to be the only one that could play the I was born here ace, but Alex has beaten me to it. So I was born in Lincoln a very long time ago. And for anyone that hasn't visited Lincoln, you don't have to get very close to realise there's a big uphill bit and then a downhill bit. And the uphill bit is where the cathedral and the castle are. And just the other side of the castle is a little row of terraced houses. And that's where I lived as a child. And always, I grew up thinking everyone had a castle in their back garden. them. So initially it is that historical, we are custodians of a small part of time, back to time, in something that's been around since Roman times, or probably before Roman times, but certainly got Roman, history, and ever since. So to be part of something so big and so established is actually quite exciting. I am walking under an arch that Roman centurions probably walked under. It's quite, that's quite a bit of a spine-tingling moment. But also you come downhill where the university is based, and you've got sort of all the modern shops, bars, restaurants, clubs. Don't go clubbing very much about it nowadays, but I'm reliably informed. So you've got all of that buzz. And the university itself isn't that old, 25, 26 years old, and built on old railway sidings. So it's all about regeneration and renewal. And I like the idea of being somewhere where that has happened. And I think anyone that comes to Lincoln can be part of that continuing story of history, that you are adding your bit. And actually it's a city where you can really make a difference. You could come here, work, set up an organization, set up a company, employ other people, and make a really big, significant difference to the city. It's going places, it's growing, it has been doing over millennia. And to me, that is really exciting to be part of that story, be part of the Lincoln story. So yeah, that kind of excites me.
Yeah, that's such a cool way of thinking about it as well. We've got some really good questions coming through that anyone can answer, because it's not specific to any one course. So Sam here has said, as a student, it's a worry about balancing studying and other commitments such as a part-time job. Do any of you have any tips on maintaining a work-life balance?
I've got something to get the ball rolling.
Yeah,
I think one thing I would say is, as lecturers, I think we can all say we all understand the varied lifestyles and challenges that students face. And I think an important thing to remember as a student here is you'll have a personal tutor, you'll have a contact you can go to quite early on. I think it's always important to be really transparent with whoever it is that you have as your contact, because there's some accommodations that can sometimes be made in terms of timetabling or things like that where it's appropriate to do so. I think it's important to reach out and get that support. But so my point there is to reach out and speak out to those around you and say, if you need support, if you're struggling, be aware that we've got support available, whether it's from the academic team, or whether it's from student support or student wellbeing. There's a huge support structure that will wrap around you. But more practically, I guess, I think make sure that you are aware of the expectations of the course as early as possible, so that you can kind of manage what your work and study balance and work life balance is going to be like when you join the university. It's a difficult thing to manage, and it's a challenge, but it's absolutely doable. People do it every single year, and it's always just important to make sure you know what the expectations of your course are as early as possible. Get those key deadlines and assessment dates diarised, and have open and frank conversations with your personal tutor, but also your employer, to make sure that you can find that balance. But yeah, we'll always help where we can to support you with that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. Like I didn't realise that personal tutors were a thing in your first year, and so yeah. Now I love my personal tutor, and he's such an amazing resource, and I know loads of my friends find it the same. So yeah, and also giving yourself a bit of leniency to make a couple of mistakes in your first year, and learning the balance is also, because most people in there, especially if they're doing undergraduates, they've never done this before. So giving yourself a little bit of grace to figure it out, really, and you don't have to get it right straight away, or at least that's what I tell myself. But yeah, if anyone else wants to jump in that's got anything to add.
I think the only thing I would add to Sam is that it does depend on the programme, so it might be worth checking with your programme leaders as to what the structure of those programmes are. If you're doing something like nursing or medicine, you're going to be out on placement, and there could be chunks of time where you're going to struggle to keep down a part-time job as well. Also, it's really not a good idea to get a nightclub job that keeps you working till 5 a.m. and then be expected to be in 9 a.m. lectures. So maybe pick the work you can do that fits around your timetable. But if we can move the timetable, we would look to do that. But it can be very difficult when loads and loads of students all want the timetable moved. So we would have to hesitate to promise to be able to give everyone a bespoke timetable. But I think most of us do recognise that it is a balancing act, and this isn't an unusual thing that people have to do. So it's just working out what fits right for your programme as to how you undertake part-time work and when that might be. But check with your programme to be absolutely sure.
Yeah, I know. I think that's good advice. We've got one more question here that is for everyone. So we'll go around in a little circle again because that seems to be working well. What advice would you give a new student at the university that is going to be joining soon? So Ollie, if we start with you.
Yeah, I guess in one word, explore. I think the thing is there's so much available, whether that's academically, extracurricularly, sort of socially, or whether it's, as was sort of suggested earlier, areas of support that are available to you. There's so much here. It's almost a difficult task to understand just how much is available to you. But it's only by making that effort to, what societies can I join? How can I start my own if no one's already got one about cereal? But they probably do already have one about cereal. So, there's so many opportunities to take. I think the first thing to do is take that time to just see how many are available to you, because some of them you might know you want to pursue already. Some of them might be opportunities that have never even occurred to you, but actually they spark a new interest. And other ones, of course, just avenues of support when you've been struggling with things and you didn't know that there was potential support there to help you with those things. Then one of the great things about Lincoln is just how many different levels and varieties of support we have for our students. So I think, explore.
Yeah,
I would jump in with a very similar message there, which would just be get stuck in as much as you feel comfortable in doing so, because it is true, there's a huge range of stuff that you can do in the city and on campus, whether it's at the university with the sports and societies. And as Ollie has said, if you can't find something that you're interested in, start it. When I was a student, me and my housemates started the a cappella society, which is still running to this day because there wasn't one, but now there is. But societies can bubble up based on your interests. But equally, you've got the high street so nearby. You can find so many things to get involved with and meet new people. It's just an important thing to recognise when you're in the new city that a lot of first-year students feel the same way. If you're feeling nervous or apprehensive about going to a new city and meeting new people, you're surrounded by a lot of people who are in the exact same boat, and everyone is looking to connect and make friends and feel part of this city as their home. So if you get stuck in, I can say with great confidence, you will find your family here and you will have a great time if you're prepared to push yourself out there a little bit and get involved as much as you can.
fabulous. Yeah, Alex.
So I'd probably say the same sort of thing again. Unfortunately, sorry, but look for the opportunities that are available that fit with your interests, and maybe some that are just slightly at a tangent to your interests that stretch you a bit further. Things like Welcome Week when you start your studies. Everybody is advertising everything. Don't feel you have to do everything, but do look at everything that's out there, because you might just find some new interests as well as your current ones. And there probably is a cereal society. You're right. That was what you said, Ollie, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I'm sure there will be. I think there's over 160 different societies now, so I'm sure that there'll be something like that. So yeah, Joanna.
Every year.
Yeah, exactly.
And yes, I think the other thing to add is, of course, that if there isn't a society there that suits your particular interests, you can always seek to set one up through the student union. So that may not be new students at the uni, but maybe my second or third year. I just wanted to pick up, and it's sort of in answer to Maddie's question as well about feeling anxious doing presentations, and we all feel anxious. You think we're anxious, we're a bit anxious doing this. And we're paid to talk, as you heard earlier. This is quite normal. And for most students, I think it's understood, and there's lots of leniency in terms of learning the craft and practicing it. It's very unlikely, and again, you could always check this to be absolutely sure and reassured, that any particular module will be 100% presentation. Some of it will be written work, some of it will be spoken. It might just be a small element. And I think there was also a question about postgraduate management programs and the presentations on those, and that would be the same. If it's going to be assessed, it will be a small part. What I would say as well, if somebody has something that goes beyond a bit nervous or a bit anxious to something where actually it could be considered, some sort of even, I'm struggling to use the right word, but some sort of learning difference that might warrant actually some appropriate alternative assessment, then that is something we can look at. So the other thing I would say in answer to what should you do as a new student, the thing is to engage with all the support services that are available. And if you need any particular reasonable adjustments to be put in place quite early on, please do seek those out, because we've got brilliant services set up to assess you, to document what those are. They then go to all your teachers, all your lecturers. So we make sure those adjustments are put in place. In those extreme circumstances, it could potentially mean an alternative assessment. I know a lot of students would rather do a presentation than sit an exam, for example, and I'm not saying they would be the alternatives at all, but you could have a conversation with someone rather than having to stand up and be recorded in front of lots of people. Personally, I'm much more comfortable talking to a lecture theatre of 500 than I am being filmed on something like this. So we all have things that are our happy and a comfort place and the things that aren't. And I suppose it's just measuring the extent to which those are things you want to try and test and push yourself that bit further, as my colleagues have already said, and those things that genuinely you actually just can't do because there's an issue there that we have to address. So I hope that reassures you, Maddie, and hopefully we'll welcome you on the marketing programme later, and look forward to working with you to develop your skills in a way that both stretches you and keeps you safe and comfortable as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think just from personal experience, some of the what's the word I'm looking for? The student services at Lincoln is just incredible here, and yeah, they're some of the best in any of the universities that I looked at, I know for sure. We've got just a couple more questions before we finish up. So Ellie has asked about joint courses, and I don't know if any of you teach on joint courses. So she's doing sociology and criminology, and if any of you knew anything about the joint courses and the workload on that, anyone can jump in.
I don't have a comment on that particular combination, but I would say, because for our law programs, we have a joint law and criminology program. What I'd say is the workload should near enough be the same, like the comment that I think has already come back from the team, that the workload should be the same. It just might not take the same form. It is the key thing. It's like what we just heard a moment ago. If you take law, for example, law is quite a light subject in terms of lecture and seminar hours, but it's quite heavy backfilled by the amount of independent research you have to do. Whereas, if we took a degree like nursing, or those that are a bit more lab and clinical session based, you'll probably find that your independent study time might not be quite as heavy, but you will spend a lot more longer periods of time in timetable times. Because the point here is these programs, the way they're calculated, is usually based on how many hours of work it will take you to build up the knowledge. So it should always equal out at the same amount of workload overall. But as I say, it is just the shape and the form of that workload will change from degree to degree. So I can't comment specifically on how sociology and criminology work, but like the comment says in the chat feed there, if you contact the program leaders, you can get an idea of how the sociology element will vary to the criminology element, and whether one has more direct teaching and one might have more independent study, and you can get a better idea of the workload split there.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And I know this is a bit of a random one, but it's interesting nonetheless. So I know, Liz, you said that you started the a cappella society. Someone has asked, is it difficult to start a society?
It's a really good question, because that drags up some memories. Now, I can't comment on the student union processes as they are today, because I'm scrolling back a decade. But From what I remember, and I assume it's probably roughly the same, you just need to have a plan, kind of an identity for what the society is, what it is you want it to do, and be able to kind of put that into a document to explain to the union what it is the society will do. And I think you need to have a certain number of people who are kind of subscribing members who say they will join. Is it, how many was that? Sorry?
3.
3. Is it just 3? Oh, I think we
Yeah.
have to do 10. Damn. But I do remember the most exciting part of the process. I say exciting in italics with a squiggle all over it. Is there was a panel event where we had to go into the student union, meet the other society leaders, and we had to pitch the society. And I remember the Musical Theatre Society at the time, they were kind of saying, well, this kind of seems like something we do. And we had to stand there and say, well, no, because we're not doing scheduled performances, we're not doing shows, we are just a group that come together, sing purely vocals. That's all we do. It's casual. And then the other societies voted as to whether they thought it was independent enough and unique enough to the other societies to be approved. And it was. So it was a fairly straightforward process. It was just that little bit of rigor at the end. I don't know if that's still done the same way now. But yeah, the union is there to help students and enable students to pursue these opportunities rather than to be restrictive. So more than likely, if you've got a good idea and it's something people are interested in, you can get it set up.
Yeah, no, for sure. And there's loads of lists on the student union website of what is already available. And like I said, there's I think over 160 now that we've got going. So we've been chatting for nearly an hour. It's amazing. So we are going to wrap this up here, but I want to say thank you so much to all the academics that have given their time to answer all of your questions, and thank you everyone for watching and giving your questions over. Just to say that if you have any more specific questions, to email inquiries@lincoln.ac.uk. If they are specific to one of the academics that have spoken today, just pop that in the subject and we will pass that over to them, and they can give you some more tailored information to your specific query. But thank you so much everyone for joining, and thank you everyone here for all your time and all your expertise, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.